Hello, my name is Colin Murray.
Where and when were you born?
I was born in Hamilton on the 5th of February, 1922.
So how old are you right now, Mr. Murray?
I'm 97 years old.
Do you feel like you're 97?
No, I don't. I'm still able to get around, although the family won't let me drive anymore, which is a bit annoying. But I'm quite sure I could still do it. But however, that's their wish. So.
Physically, what is it like to be 97?
Oh, well, you've just got to put up with it. You realise you can't do what you used to do. And but there's one thing, sleep comes fairly easily, whereas earlier in the years, probably when you're working and get wound up about your work and so on, what goes on the farm, it's sometimes quite difficult to get to sleep. But hopefully by the time you get to my age, those worries are behind you and you can drop off to sleep, no trouble.
And tell me, sir, what branch of the military were you in?
I was in the infantry, the 24th Infantry Battalion, 2nd NZEF.
And what company were you in?
D Company, 24th Battalion. And 18 Platoon, D Company, 24th Battalion of the New Zealand Division in North Africa and Italy.
And what was your specific job in 18 Platoon?
Well, as an infantryman, of course, you start off at the bottom and work up. And I here in New Zealand for 3 years until I turned 21. And then once I turned 21, it only took a fortnight and I was on my way over to the Middle East. To Egypt to join the division, the New Zealand Infantry Division in Egypt, which I duly did. And of course I arrived there just in time to see the end of the war in North Africa. The troops were all returning from up the desert, or as they used to call it in those days, up the blue. In fact, a good friend of mine wrote a book and he called it Up the Blue. So I joined the division at a Mahdi camp just outside Cairo, in North Africa. And then after some time, of course, with the Italian invasion, we were shipped over to Italy, and they'd actually invaded Italy, and the Germans had pulled back a certain distance, and so once all the army equipment joined us, trucks and artillery guns and all the paraphernalia of a war. And then we moved up to the Sangro River, and that really started the ball rolling then, or the shots being fired, whichever way you like to look at it.
Before we move on, I just want to get a couple more basic questions answered for the record. What was the highest rank you achieved by the time you left the service?
Second lieutenant.
And could you please tell me, were you ever wounded in combat?
No, although I've got some shrapnel in my legs that I never knew anything about until I had a heart bypass and they were looking for veins to graft into my heart, and so they x-rayed my legs, and that's when they found that I had some shrapnel in my legs.
Do you remember the incident that led to that?
No, well, there were so many. No, I don't remember any one little incident. It was all pretty full on there in Italy.
So you were born in Hamilton.
Yes.
Did you grow up in Hamilton?
Outside Hamilton, yes, on the farm at Tuikaramea, and did my schooling at the local school and then a technical college in Hamilton.
Talk to me about growing up in the area around Hamilton. What kind of things did you do for fun as a kid?
Well,
growing up?
it's beautiful farming country, of course. And in those days, we used to get an awful lot of peat fires because the main trunk railway line went right through the middle of the Ruakahai peat swamp. And it was the steam trains in those days, of course. So just a spark from the engine and it set the whole swamp on fire throughout the summer. So, yeah, I grew up with the smell of burning peat in my nose. And the farm that my father had, 350 odd acres, and 2/3 of that was raw peat. Difficult to get grass to grow on it in those days.
Can you tell me about the type of work that you did on the farm growing up?
Well, of course, there were no tractors then. It was all horse work. So I grew up riding horses to school, and then any work to be done on the farm, it was all done with teams of horses. So I learnt to handle horses from a very young age, and as I say, if you want to do a farm job or whatever, you went and harnessed a horse. It was 2 or 3 horses or whatever.
Did you have any brothers or sisters?
I have one brother still living, but the eldest in the family was a girl, and she's passed on. And then I had one older brother, and also he's passed on, and I've still got one younger brother.
Did any of your brothers serve in the military during the war?
No, they didn't, because my older brother was unfit. So, and my younger brother was too young, 9 years younger than me. So he was too young to serve.
So you were the only one who went overseas from the family?
I was the only one, yes, during the war, yes. Oh, the Depression, yes. Oh, well, of course, there was no spare money at all. Everything you did was done yourself. For instance, Mum used to bake all our bread, and you didn't employ any labour because you couldn't afford it. And so everyone in those days on the farm, most farms had orchards, and so you preserved all the fruit and so on from the orchards, and everyone had big kitchen gardens that I don't even remember seeing a greengrocer in town when I was a young boy. Everyone had their own vegetable gardens.
Before the war broke out, what were you planning on doing with your life?
Oh, I was going back on the farm, and I left college at the age of 15 and went onto the farm, and then the war came along, of course, and so I was conscripted, although all through the college days we'd done a lot of army work. So I was conscripted into the Waikato Regiment and served for 3 years into the Waikato Regiment because at that time the Japanese were on their way down here to New Zealand, and they really did intending to occupy New Zealand. They had printed New Zealand currency, and the convoy of troops and ships and everything was on their way down here. And the Americans had broken the Japanese code, so they had found out about it, and they had a big battle that's known today as the Battle of the Coral Sea. And that saved this country from being invaded by the Japanese.
Can you talk to me, how did you actually hear about the declaration of war in 1939 when Great Britain declared war on Germany?
Yeah.
How did you hear about that?
Well, on the news. And, the newspapers were full of it. So, it was, common conversation that here we go, and there were plenty of people still living who had served in the First World War.
Did your father serve in the First World War?
No, he was unfit. But I had an uncle who did. My father had a hernia, a bad hernia, and they hadn't learned to operate in those days. So he was classed as unfit. And my brother had burst all the cartilages in his knee, my older brother. So that left me, and when I turned 18, into camp, and I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Army life.
Yeah, well, because I knew most of the guys. We'd been at college together, so we all met up again, and we, all the way through college, we had been doing army training. Had a whole week of it to start each year, and then we had a whole morning of it every term, of drill, army drill, and rifle instruction and so on. If you'd asked me that, then I would say the way we spent our time in New Zealand was route marching. We did huge amounts of route marching. And, up to 35 miles a day. And as I said earlier, the Japanese were getting closer, so they were moving us from the Waikato further north. And we were getting ready for invasion of this country. But then, as I said, the Americans stopped that with the Battle of the Coral Sea and broke up the convoy that was on its way here. So, thankfully, it never happened.
So, how did you end up getting overseas, Mr. Murray?
Well, I stayed in the Waikato Division, of course, until I turned 21. And by that time we were in camp way up North Auckland. And once I turned 21, within a fortnight, I was on final leave to go overseas. So I joined up with a lot of other men of my own age, and we sailed on the Dominion Monarch, beautiful ship, and finished up in Egypt. And off the boat and on the lighters and up in the Red Sea at a port called Tufik. And we went ashore and hopped on a train waiting for us there. And off we went up north into North Africa and joined the New Zealand Division at Mahdi, which is just outside Cairo.
And talk to me about your first interactions with the men who had been in combat in North Africa. What kind of advice did they give you about the combat that you would be facing eventually?
Well, just the same as we'd been practicing for many years. This was the real thing. There's not a lot of difference except that someone's shooting at you. Or perhaps it's artillery shells. And we saw a lot of that, artillery combats and so on. But we're pretty well drilled in it the time we got into action. And I remember my first night, we'd marched up, it's been 20 miles or so, and then we were told, well, we'd reached the Sangro River in Italy, and told to dig in. So I started to dig a slip trench, and I only got about halfway down, and they said, well, you can stop digging. You've got to go across the river and get a prisoner. So it was February, the middle of Italian winter, and boy, it got awfully cold in Italy. It started snowing a day or two later. So the platoon I was in, we moved down to the river after it got dark, which was about half a mile walk, I suppose, downhill most of the way. And so you stepped down. It was light enough to see the other side of the river. And so I thought, well, no one's going to get across there. They'll be just picking us off like I don't know what. But anyhow, you step down into this river and your boots fill up with cold water. And then it creeps right up. And it got as far as under my chin. And I was on my tiptoes with my rifle held above my head. And we reached the other side and hunted around, and we couldn't find any Germans anywhere. Fortunately, they had retreated back higher up above the river, so they weren't just down on the river banks when we arrived. Otherwise, he probably wouldn't have been talking to me now. But, that was the first night. You get back to the positions you're going to hold, and they say, well, you can finish digging in, and you're cold and wet and miserable and so on, so you set to and dig in. You've had nothing to eat for 24 hours. And they can't give you anything because it's, it's too daylight for people to move around. So you've got to wait until after dark before you get any food of any sort. And so that was the situation for the best part of a week. And then we did the big attack across the river.
Take me through the attack across the Sangro River. What do you remember about that?
Well, a heck of a lot of noise for a starter, because they pounded all the positions we were to capture. Our artillery fired what we used to call stonks, whereas a whole battery of artillery will concentrate on one area, perhaps the size of this house. So if you're in that area, you haven't got a lot of chance of surviving, because the shells will just come screaming in. And as a shell approaches and lands, it makes a great screaming noise. And I think a lot of it is psychological warfare. So yeah, if you survive, you keep your head down and you slit trench and so on, and if you survive. So that's it. And you've got to wait until after dark before food arrives. So if you miss out the first night you cross the river, you get back, you haven't a dog show of getting any food until after dark that next night.
You were taking me through the attack on the Sangro River.
Yes. Well, it was some days later. And we went over with the artillery support pounding into the other side of the river. So we got across without any casualties at all in our unit, 24th Battalion. And there was a little village called Marabella on the other side of the river, and the Germans had retreated back to that bridge, to that little village. So we got in behind the village and started attacking it from the rear, which took the Germans totally by surprise. So we didn't have a lot of trouble capturing this little village. And so a mate and I were digging a slit trench together, and a German sniper got on to us, just getting daylight. And he was hit by 2 bullets. And of course he collapsed down beside me. And you hear all about this picking a man up that's wounded, and but you know, he's got web gear on with all his ammunition in the web gear, and he's a heck of an awkward person to try and move and carry. So anyhow, I got another guy to help me, and we carried him back a bit and got him into a house. And the Italian houses there, one of the rooms on the bottom story was where they kept animals, and there's always a bit of hay there. So we put him down on the hay, and I tried. He was terribly cold and still alive, but I knew jolly well that, you know, he wasn't going to survive. So we just could only do what to try and keep him warm and so on until we got further medical help. And that meant getting a doctor across the river and all the medical staff and so on. So I doubt whether he lived. We moved on pretty soon afterwards, and so I'm not sure what happened to him, but I'm pretty sure he passed on.
Do you remember his name?
Yes, Laurie Thode, that was him. Yeah. lorry third. He was the man hit. And
when you took him to the barn, was the German sniper still firing at you all as you tried to carry him?
No. I've often wondered about that. Because I was moving around quite a bit, and he must have been able to see me, but he never fired another shot. So just why, I don't know, whether that little man pets on my shoulder.
And was Laurie, was he conscious the entire time?
He was a great guy, Laurie, yeah. Came from Auckland. And, a great chap altogether.
After he was wounded by the German sniper, was he still conscious? Was he talking?
He was, yes, he was. But, of course, he'd just crossed the river too, and he was incredibly cold. So, you rub his back and his chest and so on, and you don't know where to touch him because of the bullet wounds. So it's an awfully difficult thing. You can see almost from the start that he's not going to survive.
Can you talk to me about your first experience under German artillery fire?
Well, the first shell, as a shell approaches a position, it makes a very, very loud screaming noise. And after a while you get used to, well, not totally used to it, I suppose, but you do get to know just how close the shell is coming. And after some time, you can be a little bit casual about it all and say, oh, this one's okay. I don't have to duck. It's not going to land just beside me or anything. So, yeah, it's not a nice experience to be under shell fire. And that's the way it's meant to be, I guess.
During your time in combat, what would you say was the closest that a German artillery shell came towards your position?
Oh, I got nearly buried at one time. I'd taken a bit of shelter because we'd been getting pretty heavy machine gun fire. So it's amazing what will give you a bit of cover. Just a little hollow in the ground will save your life. But I dived into the gutter on the side of the road, which wasn't wet, it was dry. And these, I don't know if it's a shell fire or mortar fire, but one's as bad as another. The difference is that with shell fire, you hear the shell coming before in that split second or two, before it arrives. But with mortar fire, because mortars have got a different trajectory, they're fired into the air almost vertical, and they come screaming back down to earth, and the object is for them to hit you, land on you. So it makes a different noise. And after a while you get quite used to whether you're going to dive for the gutter of the road or just disregard it. Yeah.
So you were saying this in this one incident, you dived for the gutter.
Yeah, and the shell landed on the top of the bank, and the whole bank collapsed over the top of me. And I was lying on my front, on my belly. The head wasn't covered or anything, but all my body was covered with the shell had sort of cut the bank off, and it just had to fall over the top of me. So, not a nice experience, but
Can you talk to me about the weapons that you carried in combat?
Well, of course, a platoon, an infantry platoon, is approximately 30 men, 28 or 30 men. And that's divided into 3 sections of 7 men in each section. And then, of course, you've got a platoon commander who is a second lieutenant. You've got a medical person with you, first aid. So, and also a wireless operator. So you've got these other ones as well. So a total infantry platoon would be about 30 men, or 32 at the maximum. Sometimes we had an artillery observation officer with us who was in direct contact with our planes flying up there over us, and he could tell our artillery where to drop the shells and so on. So about approximately 30 people in a platoon.
But you as the platoon...
The weapons, you want to know the weapons? Each platoon of 7 men, the section leader had a Tommy gun. So that was my weapon for most of the Italy war. Tommy gun, which is exactly the same weapon that American gangster Al Capone, exactly the same weapon as he had, except that we managed to get, well, I did, a bigger magazine. The magazines, because the Tommy gun is a .45 caliber weapon, which is far too big for a combat weapon, because the ammunition is so heavy. It's far, from an army point of view, it's better to wound someone than kill them, because a wounded man is going to cause a lot more trouble than one that's shot dead. But you've got the Tommy gun with the platoon commander, and then each of the 3 section leaders, they carry a Tommy gun as well. So you've got 4 Tommy guns there. And then the rest of the section, of the platoon, each man carries a 303 rifle. And the last man in the platoon carried a 2-inch mortar. And the mortar fires, and he's got to carry the mortar bombs as well. So everyone's well loaded up with. And, you had a sack on your back, and web gear in the front full of ammunition and grenades. And our little grenades were fantastic little weapons. We just loved the grenades. You could get in close and you could do a lot of damage with a grenade.
Can you tell me about some specific times that you guys used grenades in combat? What kind of circumstances would you be using grenades?
Well, one of them was the house we had occupied, and the Germans attacked it one night, and they came up. It was a building, actually, in a casino, the building, and they came up to the front of the building, and they started, because all the windows and everything were gone, and they started firing inside, and the bullets were hitting the ceiling, which was all stone, and were ricocheting all over the room. So a time like that is just made for using hand grenades. So one of the boys crept over to the window up in the second story and just pulled the pin on his hand grenade and dropped it over the edge. And of course it fell down amongst these Germans down there, and it did a lot of damage. There was no more firing for quite a while.
Would there be other instances that you guys would use grenades that you can recall?
Yeah, you never just walk into a house. The house is empty. If it's just been, fought over, before you'd go in, you'd throw a grenade in, let it go off. Because you come here, for instance, and you come to the back door there, and you weren't sure whether there's anyone here waiting for you with his fingers on the trigger. So you toss a grenade in just to make sure, and wait for it to go off, and then in you go yourself.
When it comes to the house-to-house fighting that you're referring to, Mr. Murray, the houses that you went into personally, were they always vacant, or did you ever find Germans in them?
The houses were all made of stone, these outlying. We were never in the cities. It's all the war was fought out in the open country. And so we were occupying these, sometimes with a little group of houses, but not a city. So that was jolly good. Quite often, well, most times, they'd surrender, the Germans. Yeah, they'd surrender. On one occasion, we had captured about, I suppose, 25 Germans. They had dug split trenches right down about, way, way down. They even had bunks and everything underground. And we attacked this place and caught them napping first early in the morning. And so they didn't know we were there. We just got them all as they were coming up, one by one. And so we had about 20 captured Germans, and they were all quite happy. I think they were quite pleased to have been captured. And so they were sort of given to me to look after. So we were still in a bit of action there, so I got two of the boys to round these Germans up, keep them in a group, and take them back to battalion headquarters. They had to go back down a hill. So they started off back down there, and then the German artillery got onto them, and, well, at least one of the men I'd put in charge of them was hit, and the other one was trying to help him, and we lost all the prisoners. There was a road there, a sunken road, so there was quite a high bank round, and they got down onto that bank and crept around and got right back with their own troops again.
The man who was hit by the German artillery, was he wounded or was he killed?
No, wounded. Mm-mm. Mm.
Wow. I'm sure if you were the one that took them back, the Germans would have made it back.
The Germans, there was a code of conduct, really, between the Germans and us. No one carried a knife. Knives were out. You just didn't carry a knife because it just wasn't done. Okay to carry a bayonet on the end of your rifle, which is the same thing virtually, but not a knife. So they didn't carry knives and neither did we. So there is a certain code of conduct, even amongst infantrymen like that. Yeah.
Mr. Murray, before we move on, you had mentioned that when it comes to the house-to-house fighting, the Germans would usually give up. They would surrender when you guys would occupy the house.
Well, hopefully.
Were there any times that the Germans did not give up, but they fought back?
Oh, yeah, if they could get a sight of you first, of course they would, yeah.
Do you remember
But, when you're capturing a town, for instance, the casino you always see that main road coming in and going along past the front of the two hotels, Hotel Del Rosa and the Hotel Continental. And they were very, very heavily fortified, those two hotels. But it looked like it was the main road through the town. Well, to advance onto the town and take that main road, you'd just be crazy. Because someone's just bound to get hit with all that armament against you. But there's nothing to stop you going a little bit further back into the village and going through one of the streets further back and bypassing these highly fortified spots. So that's what I always tried to do with them.
Can you talk to me about any experiences you had against the German Luftwaffe? Were you ever strafed by the German fighter planes?
I don't remember being strafed by the German fighters had come over, and usually before long, well, our ACAC, anti-aircraft fire, would get onto them straight away, the artillery. And most of the time, we had an aircraft spotter. And they flew these little Piper Cub planes, and they just floated around up there. And on one occasion, I saw a German Messerschmitt tried to shoot one of them down. This tiny little Piper Cub aircraft, no guns on it. Probably the pilot flying it might have had a Tommy gun or a pistol in his pocket, in his belt, I don't know. But he didn't have a dog show getting him, because as soon as the German got lined up, he was so manoeuvrable with this little plane that he could get out of the way of the German fighter. And in the finish, they finished up not very far up in the air at all. And we started firing at the German plane with our rifles. So we'd been watching the whole drama. So that's when he called it quits, and away he went. And that was good news for us to see our pilot, our plane, nothing at all.
Wow.
Another time we'd crossed the river.
Which river?
The Sangro, and captured our position that we were supposed to capture. Had some casualties, wet and cold as a frog, and And our engineers were trying to get a Bailey bridge built across the river so that they could get artillery and heavy equipment over to join us and give us support. So this 2 German fighter planes were coming in and screaming down the river from the flying up river and strafing the engineers and so on, trying to get this Bailey Bridge built. And each of them carried 1 bomb, and they dropped their bomb too. And then they came just not much more than head height, or house height, above the position we'd captured. And they were just up there. And they were screaming flat out. You could see the plane, every inch of speed they could get out of it. And they did this twice. And the next time it happened, right in behind them was a Spitfire. We never knew it was there even. It must have been a bit higher, and the pilot must have seen what was happening. So he just got in behind them, and not a great deal above roof height. And it was just out there in front of us. This German fighter going like blazes with one of our Spitfires right on his tail. And the Spitfire put some bullets in. He could see his guns fire with the black smoke coming out from his wings on the either side as his guns, and the German plane rocked a bit. And then he put the other German plane a bit further on, he put some bullets at that too. And then he just swung back onto this first one with his guns, and it just went zonk straight into the ground, and there's a huge column of black smoke and so on. Then he tilted back again, and you could just see his wings tilt a bit, and more smoke coming out of his guns. And the leading German plane, it crashed. We didn't actually see it, but a bit further on, another big black column of smoke. So that was a fantastic morale buster. We were cold and wet, and we'd had casualties and so on, and to see that happen, boy, it was just fantastic. Yeah. It wasn't much good for the Germans, but it was good for us.
Can you please talk to me about, you mentioned that you carried a Tommy gun.
Yeah.
Talk to me about your feelings about the Tommy gun, about its accuracy, and about under what kind of circumstances would it be best used in combat?
Oh, no, it's a Tommy gun. It's far too heavy. It's you don't need a big caliber firearm like that. 45 caliber. It's, and you could only carry 50 rounds or so, and there's such a high rate of fire that, brrr, it's all gone. And they're highly inaccurate. So, yeah, a little 22 rifle that mostly used on the farms for rabbit shooting, they'd be far more effective as an automatic for combat. Whether they do it or they ever will, I wouldn't know, but...
What was the range of the Tommy gun?
No, it was very, very short and highly inaccurate. When you fire that gun, it wants to rise up like this. Doesn't matter And the whole, you've got to concentrate. You've got a handle underneath. You've got to concentrate on holding it down and a tight, tight grip on it. So, yeah, it's a highly inaccurate gun, so you depend on lots of ammo.
But if the range is not very long...
No, useless more than about 50 yards.
I mean, is it common as an infantry soldier to actually be that close to the German infantry within 50 yards?
Yeah, it could be. Yeah. 50 yards a little way, yeah. But they wouldn't be using a Tommy gun because we all had sniper's rifles as well. Each platoon had at least one sniper's rifle. So we made good use of them.
When you were in combat, how close would you say was the closest you actually got to the German infantry?
Oh, right up to them. Because, they surrender when they realise that, well, you hope they do.
I should have been more clear. In a firefight, how close would you say you guys usually are to the Germans?
Depends entirely on the situation, Sometimes you can find a position that, for instance, if you were dug in here, you've got a good field of fire, right down to the road. So any advance from down there, it'd be very difficult to attack this up here. But if you're in a group of buildings, it's a different matter. But, you can get in much closer.
Can you talk to me about some of the patrols that you went on?
So the patrols, well, they weren't nice. That's what I can tell you. Because it's foreign country to you. And it's dark. And you've got a job to do. If you're going out on a patrol, you've either got to get a prisoner or you've got to go and observe and try and find a way of getting to the Germans, of capturing it. So patrols are not good. They're a necessary thing, but it's something that you've got to just be so careful about.
What do you mean?
Well, you don't go rushing into it. You just move as slowly and as quietly as you possibly can. Well, I did. And, they talk about we've got 6 senses. I became convinced that I had more than 6 senses. I could sense the presence of another human being, even though they were yards away. And your hearing just becomes so acute with listening. And it's very difficult for anyone that's approaching, say, he's probably got hobnail boots. He's carrying things lots of metal that can clink and clank and carry on. So it's very different for someone approaching to remain totally quiet. So I found tonight that my hearing became extremely acute because I was using it at night all the time.
The patrols that you would go on, sir, were they mostly reconnaissance patrols or prisoner patrols? I mean, Can you tell me about some specific patrols that you
Well,
went on?
one occasion, one of our platoons in a house, and this German patrol had surrounded the house, and they'd killed some of our guys that were on sentry duty outside the house. So they called out, or they radioed out, for assistance. So I was given the job of taking a patrol over there to help them out, which I did. And as we got close up, I suppose the house was about here down to the school way, and dark as anything, black. But as we got closer, they were firing at all sorts of things, so we eventually got almost over to the house, and some of our guys that had got that occupied the bottom floor, but then a German patrol had come and they were firing through what used to be windows, and the bullets were hitting the ceiling and ricocheting all around the room. So we managed to we had to deal with one or two Germans first, but we managed to get into the house. And I shouted out to our guys that we were there for them to stop firing. And there was at least one German outside and firing up, and a couple of us walked over to the windows and just pulled the pin on the grenade, and we had the most wonderful little hand grenades and just dropped it over the edge of the window. And of course it probably landed just at this guy's feet, and I can still hear him screaming. I think it must have cut him in half nearly. And then one of the boys, a Maori boy I knew very well, he called out to me to come in. So he got into the house. And strange things happen with buildings that get bombed, because this had been a commercial building, and top story was blown off, but there was still a staircase on the outside of the house, still a staircase going up to the second story, and it reached a landing, not much bigger than this here, and all the rest was blown away. There's still a staircase going up. So this Maori boy, he'd been in and knew the lay of the land better than me. He said, "Come and give us a hand here, Cole." So we got up onto this little, what was left of the first story up. And of course we were looking down on the German patrol coming in, where all the firing was coming from. It was quite easy to see. So we did a fair bit of damage. Well, you could toss grenades in the right place, you see, if you can see where the firing is coming from. You let them have it.
Were you guys also firing your rifles or just
the grenade's a thing. If you got the grenade, it's great. They can't tell where it's come from either. Yeah, it's all part of it.
Did the German patrol ever make it to the house, or they were all stopped?
I don't think many made it to the house. There may have been, dark, You can't really tell. We, when we captured a German or a group of Germans, they were just like us. Some of them could speak good English, and they were just like us. You used to think, well, what the hell's going on here?
Did you guys have a hatred for the Germans? I mean,
No, you don't. I didn't. I don't know anyone who did. No hatred at all. It's a strange part about it. A lot of respect, though. By golly, a lot of respect.
I really appreciate you sharing that story with me about the patrol. But, I mean, I hope you know that you saved a lot of their lives, the New Zealanders.
Yeah.
Right? Because you guys rescued them.
Yeah.
So, I mean, a lot of those guys probably got to come home and have families.
Yep.
Because of you.
That's right.
So, I mean, it's a good thing what you did.
Yep. Yeah. You don't think of it at the time, but, yeah. Someone had to do it. And we were the right age, and we were pretty well trained, believe me. I got to be so expert with the Tommy gun, I could just about play tunes on it. Well, it's a difficult weapon to fire.
Yeah.
Because it's got such a high rate of fire, and it jumps all over the place, You've got to really hang on to it. And you've only got a magazine. The first magazines we got only had 30 rounds. And you could squeeze off 30 rounds out of the Tommy gun in a matter of seconds almost. Then I managed to get another magazine that was even longer. They fit in up underneath. And it held, I think it was 40 rounds, which was more like it. They're extremely fast firing, and of course they jump all over the place as they're firing. So, they've got to be a very close-up weapon. Well, of course, you can't stay in this front line forever. You've got to be rested. And so there was a whole division of Polish troops in Italy with us. And on this occasion, we were going to relieve a division of Polish troops and take over their position. So when that happens, a guide, someone from the platoon, and I was platoon sergeant at that stage, has to go forward and in the dark, and he meets up with someone from the position that you're going to occupy. They'll meet up, and he takes you then to show you where the position is that they're occupying and the one that you have to take over, and all about it. And so you have a good recce all around and get a good knowledge of the situation there and where the men are going to go and so on. So then you've got until dark the next night to fill in. So on this occasion, the Polish troops, they never offered me any food. So I had some of my own, but it went all through the next day, and at night, when it came time to go back, that our troops who were coming to relieve them, I had to go back and meet them. And it was a side of a mountain that we were going to occupy. And so I'd climbed that blessed place the first night, and then I went back again the next night down to the lower level, and met up with the platoon and went, and of course I'd missed out on any food, and then went back up to the position in length and guided our troops into their positions. And by the time that happened, of course, it's probably 2 o'clock in the morning. There's no chance in the world of getting any food then at that stage. So it wasn't until the following night that some food came up. And wasn't their fault, because they can't bring in food in daylight.
Why not?
Well, they're visible, they just get shot. So it's got to be done after dark. And then what happens, it's dished up amongst the platoon that they're carrying the meal for. And you can't save anything, you've got to eat it all. So the next day, you got nothing. But it doesn't matter, you still got to eat it all. And that's what you always did. And we survived somehow.
You were talking also, though, about how exhausted you were after climbing the mountain.
Yeah, you get incredibly exhausted. I found a bed with a wire wove only. And so I crashed down and went to sleep on this wire wove. And they reckon that later on they tried to wake me up. And they said they were lifting me up in the air and dropping me. And I still wasn't. They still couldn't wake me. So I missed out on a period of guard, I guess.
Can you talk to me? Some of the veterans who I've interviewed have told me that the Allies did not always take prisoners. Did you ever hear about that happening?
There's rumours of it. No, it never happened to me. And I doubt whether I would. Well, I'd be very apprehensive about carrying it out, shooting an unarmed man. That's virtually what it amounts to. But I guess it probably happened.
I mean, there are documented cases when the Germans would do it, but I don't know about the Allies. I've heard from different veterans that, sometimes it would happen, but...
Yeah, I'm quite sure it did. I got no idea. And, if I'd just had a cobber or so shot beside me, then I'd have no trouble at all in pulling the trigger. Trevor Beer came from Cambridge. Trevor was a hairdresser.
And what happened?
He used to cut hair. One of the most dastardly things of all is anti-personnel mines buried in the ground. And there's probably almost nothing showing above the ground. And Trevor trod on one of those. We were moving forward. I knew that I could see, as soon as it got daylight enough, I could see that there were mines there because the ground was disturbed. And there might be just a little bit of bent wire sticking up above the ground. And if you tread on that, well, then you'd finished. And Trevor He wasn't very far from me. And he trod on one, and I think it, I don't know, I think it sort of must have, there was no blood or, guts fallen out or anything. It was, I think he'd just, every bone, every bit of his body was pulverised. The poor beggar was just standing there and screaming with pain. And there's not a thing you can do. You can't help in any way. You just got to keep walking on.
What was his name?
Trevor Beer.
What kind of person was he? What kind of person was Trevor Beer?
Trevor was a lovely chap. He was a hairdresser from the Beer family over at Cambridge. I had the photo of his grave, and I got in contact with them and gave them a photograph of his grave.
How old would you say he was when he was killed?
Oh, he'd have been probably 22 or something like that.
Did you know him growing up?
No, I didn't know him growing up, no, because he came from Cambridge. But then we all joined in the one platoon and got to know one another then. And he really was a great guy, Trevor.
Can you tell me more about the role and the responsibility of a platoon sergeant in combat?
Well, look after your men is the best thing.
Meaning what?
In every way, to see, for instance, a chap came to me once and he is crying. We just received a mail. We're out of line for a rest. We just received our mail from home because we'd sometimes go several months before we got mail. And he'd opened his mail and his wife wanted a divorce. She'd met up with an American. And he came to me holding this letter out and he was crying and crying. And what could I do? I just took him by the arm and I took him, each unit has a padre, and I just took him to our padre and handed him the letter. And I left them to it. Well, there was me, a boy of, 22, and something like that happened. I wouldn't know how to deal with that situation. But luckily, every unit had a padre, and they were great. They're very much needed.
Did you write any letters home yourself?
Yeah.
Who would you write to and what would you write about?
My family. I didn't have a girlfriend then. Just mainly to tell them I was still okay and, And of course, when we got a letter, you'd perhaps get half a dozen letters. They'd been building up, but you weren't anywhere near there to get them.
And so there'd be a series of letters that you would have to catch up on all at once.
Sometimes we get a delivery of letters. I remember I had 3 or 4 that I didn't have time to read them. And so I put them down in front of my battle dress. And so we moved into the line that night. And I forgot all about these letters in my battle dress. The next day was pretty quiet, and we were in a building that had a floor that was sort of covered in hay, and everyone had been using it for a latrine. So I did the same. Got my business done and did my clothes up again. And later in the day, it suddenly dawned on me, where the heck are those letters? So I went back and had a look, and sure enough, they were scattered around amongst the hay and amongst all the...
Did you pick them up?
Yeah, too right I did. Yeah, yeah, too right I did.
Can you describe the terrain of Italy and what made it such a difficult place to fight?
Well, it's mountainous, so that very much helps in a defensive position. And yeah, especially the southern part. Once you get up past Florence, the country levels out. And you still got streams and rivers to cross, but the mountains, you left them behind, or mainly. But yeah, most difficult country to attack. It's only the second time in history, because Italy's been attacked many, many times throughout the centuries, but that's only the second time it had ever been attacked from the south. Been attacked many times from the north, but only twice from the south. So way back in the Roman days and so on, I guess.
The Germans had the high ground because, they had the defensive positions. Can you talk to me? I mean, how do you go about attacking a German position if they have the high ground and they're looking down at you with machine guns?
You got to get the artillery to fire on their positions, and hopefully they'll retire, so you can move in and take over. If they don't, well, you attack, or you do something about it. So you, at a given time, you move in after dark, hopefully. I only ever did a couple of attacks in daylight, and I never wanted to do another one. But it's surprising what happens in the darkness. They can't see you. But if they start firing at you, well, then you can see the flashes of the guns and so on, where the shots are coming from, and it's much easier to deal with. But, yeah.
You had mentioned, but when you're doing an attack up a hillside or the side of a mountain at night, how do you communicate with one another?
Well, you've got to be that close that you can communicate. Otherwise, you're liable to start. So you're probably only arm's length or a couple of arm's lengths away
from one
another. And you move very, very carefully and quietly, because you're fully expecting to stand on a mine or a tripwire or something. If they have those little tripwires that will send off and let them know that you're there, and we did the same. It's only normal practice.
What is that like when you're in combat? And you're focused on getting fired at and firing back at the enemy, but also not knowing that wherever you're about to step could be a mine. I mean,
Yeah. Well, I used to say a little prayer each time before we did an attack. Whether that was any help or not, I don't know. But you might feel better about it. But,
you're still here.
I'm still here, yeah. You start to think after a while someone's got their hand on your shoulder.
You had mentioned that you had participated in some daytime attacks. Can you tell me about those? What was the objective and what happened?
Well, of course, the objective is always to capture, nearly always, the high ground, because that's where they're easy to defend.
No, but I'm saying specifically, do you remember what the objectives were specifically in the daytime attacks?
Well, it might be across a stream or a river.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes the enemy had voluntarily pulled back and left their position. So, and they probably had booby-trapped the things. You never, if it's a house, you never just, and it's all open, you know, don't walk in or you don't open the door, because if you do, there's probably a grenade attached to something up above there and it'll drop down at your feet, and all sorts of dodges to kill the enemy. That's what it amounts to.
Did you ever personally come across booby
Oh,
traps?
grenades, yes. Yeah. So, yeah, you get rid of them, shoot them up, or you don't like picking anything up because in case there's a string attached to it and so on. So it's a matter of using your nut and just thinking, being careful all the time.
Can you please tell me, can you talk to me about your experiences with the tanks, can you talk to me about your experiences with the Allied tanks supporting the infantry? Do you remember any of the attacks you made with the tanks?
Yes.
Or you guys were supporting them, the tanks?
The tanks, in some ways, they're more of a hindrance than a help, because a tank moving at night makes a devil of a lot of noise, a real screechy sort of a noise. And so it just draws all the enemy, all your own fire, the enemy fire, because they know what's going on when they hear all this screeching of tracks on the tank make a screeching noise and so on. So, that's where they're going to drop their artillery shells and anti-tank weapons and so on. One of your best defences of all are your ears. Well, all the tanks that we had were Shermans, which is an American make of tank. And they had a 75mm anti-tank gun mounted. They, when they move at night, the tracks on the ground, and they squeal and squeak and carry on, and they give you the position away, a huge amount. Instead of being all nice and quiet and so on, you're trying to get your food up, for instance. People carrying stuff into you after dark at night. And that's a nasty job too, bring all the food in, and eventually it comes to you. And so you've got your 2 mess tins, and so the food used to come in 2 round containers that were side by side, one for a stew, because there's always a stew of some sort, and the other one would be some sort of dessert. And it's in a wooden box with a rope handle on either side. So they were all brought into us with a carrying party at night time. So we had to get up out of our positions and take our mess tins and go and get something to eat. And they carried water and everything into us, ammunition, the whole works. So, so it means you've got to eat everything you can, that straight away. And you've got none left for later in the day.
Could you please tell me about your experiences at Castle Frittata?
Oh, yeah.
What was Castle Frittata?
Is Castle Frittata. It was a town. And it was on the other side of the river. After we crossed the river and captured the first little village was Marabella. And then we regrouped there and got our wounded back, and we'd had a couple of guys killed, I think, from memory. And they'd gone back to the RAP, and then it moved on, and that was the next village. And we got to the bottom of the hill. Castle Frittata was a hotel. Well, the town wasn't, but on his headquarters for the winter line, there was the Germans had this Gustav line, which ran right across Europe, from north to south and right down and across Italy as well. And this was part of it. And so we got, we got to the state where we'd crossed the river and we were moving forward. We had to move forward, I suppose, a mile or so on slowly rising ground. And as we were, this German spotter plane was flying up there, and our anti-aircraft guns got onto it, and they hit him. And we stood down and watched this aircraft up there with all the smoke pouring out from the tail of it. And then the next thing is we saw the pilot jump out and the parachute open, and this German pilot came floating down right on top of us with a parachute. And his plane went on and started to burn and then crashed. And he came down and landed, from here to the school away from me, I suppose, and he was on a slope near a little gully, and he off with his web gear and threw everything off, and he was gone like a flash down into this gully. But some of the boys were much closer than me, and they soon got him out of there. And I marked him up. He came past me, and he looked quite a youngish, well-to-do, well-dressed young German pilot. Yeah, and they took him back. So that was the one and only attack with a plane as we were moving forward.
You were talking about Castle Frittata.
Yeah,
Can you talk about the defense system that the Germans had, like the barbed wire, please?
yeah, they had living quarters below the ground for their guards and so on. And they were way down deep. They even had bunks and so on dug into the ground and places to sleep. So we captured that. And of course they didn't know we were coming. It's just getting daylight. And we ran up this hill and captured the place, and we had them all trapped. They were still all down underneath. So as they came up one by one, we disarmed them. And we must have had 20 or 30 guys there. And we lost quite a lot of them later on. They got away on us. Yeah. One of the other boys drew my attention to this. A whole crowd of Germans were getting into trucks, and they were going to. They'd evidently realised we'd captured or surrounded the place, and their idea was to get out of it, you see. And it was the most perfect shot from a machine gun that you could wish for. All these men milling about and so on. And it would have been, I don't know. Hard to know exactly how far away. 600 yards perhaps. And so a guy said to me, I can't get the gun to fire. And we were in the building by this time. And so I thought I knew every little thing that was meant to know about a Bren gun. We used to practice so much with them. We'd strip them down out in the darkness. We'd blindfold one another and strip them down and put them together again and do it all in the darkness and so on, that we could do it by hand and do it by memory. But do you think I could get that gun to fire? Those Germans must have been fated to live, I think, because I just couldn't get it. It wouldn't fire. It just wouldn't. I couldn't find what was stopping it.
Did that ever happen?
And I found out eventually what it was. It was too cold. If I'd just taken the oil bottle and gone swish swish on the working parts of that Bren gun, she'd have been as good as gold and so on. So just because it's too cold, a few Germans have lived a long life, I suppose.
Do you remember then, after you guys had occupied the Germans' headquarters section?
Yeah.
Did you have to fight to take the headquarters section, or had they all left?
We captured them without too much in the way of fighting. Because like most headquarters, they're not really cut out for fighting. You know, they're more, a lot of them are administration and so on. So, we captured that okay. What happened to everyone? After a while, they disappeared. I suppose we stayed with our own unit.
Do you remember, did the Germans counterattack at all?
No, they didn't at that stage.
What about
Not at all.
The artillery?
Yeah, you always get that in any case. Mortars mainly. Well, it had been a hotel on the outskirts of this town, and they just kept firing at it and firing at it, the Germans. And of course, when possible, someone from our outfit would fire back. And eventually, what had been a 3-story or so building got down. It was just a heap of rubble. And I don't know, some of the buildings might have been pretty poorly built or something. But, quite often the German houses, the Italian houses out in the country, they probably dug a hole out there and cut the stones out of the ground that they used to put the house up. Yeah, it's quite amazing. They just cut them out with a little saw and stones, big ones, like this. And the walls, just as well for us too, as the walls would be that thick on these houses out in the country, and they'd stand a bullet, no trouble.
Could you tell me, Mr. Murray, what was Monte Cassino and what was the strategic importance of it?
Well, you see, I think it was made because the Americans had had a go at it and they had failed. It eventually was bypassed, which could have happened right from the start. But, they had to capture it somehow or other. And so, they had to go at Cassino, and I don't know how their losses, but they must have been huge. And
but what was Monte Cassino?
It's a mountain, and it's got a monastery on the top of it, and a village at the bottom. And the main highway, heading north, Route 6 it was called, came up to the foot of the mountain and took a sharp left turn through the village, and it passed these 2 hotels, Hotel des Roses and Hotel Continental. And then it went on and up through the Liri Valley and up to Rome, the main road that goes right through central Italy. So, it should have been bypassed right from the start. But, it had to be captured. So they'd had to go, the Americans. And they'd got so far with the job. And the Polish were there in a different position. We were down on the flats in the village. And so the Polish troops were up the back trying to attack the monastery from up on top. And so, it was a crazy situation when I think back on it, that it could have been bypassed. And, Rome would have fallen then in no time.
Could you please describe what was the German defensive system at Monte Cassino? What were their defenses?
They had tanks inside houses, inside hotels. And from the front you couldn't even see them, but they were firing out. And they'd had months preparing a defence of it all, you see. So, machine guns put in the right position to strafe down a street, and the troops start to advance through the town. And so you could finish up with huge losses. But we took over a position called Hill 175, which was just on the outskirts of Casino, and we could actually sort of look down on part of it. This had been captured by the Americans, and we took over from them. We were in an awful position with snipers, and that's when a sniper missed me by thousandths of an inch, I think. And
what happened?
well, our breakfast was ground up army biscuits. Someone in the platoon had, I was going to say, he had acquired one of those little army minces, a little mince. The housewives would clip it onto a table and turn the handle, and you can put bread or whatever and it'll mince it up. So he had taken one of these out of one of the houses we'd occupied, one of those little minces. So we used to mince up army biscuits. The army biscuits are just about hard enough to break your teeth. And so we used to mince them up and into a sort of a meal then, and we had it in a cloth bag. And we used to share it round, and you each had a mess tin, well, 2 mess tins, but you'd get a measure of this cut-up biscuit into your mess tin, and hopefully a little bit of warm water, and that was your breakfast. So, where did I get to?
You were talking about the sniper.
Oh, yeah. We had run out of ground up biscuit. So one of the boys said, come and give us a hand. And it took 2. So we were kneeling down, facing one another. Look, he was kneeling there, and one of us was holding the mincer and turning the handle, and the other one was putting the biscuit in and catching it with a bag, a cloth bag down here. So we were both on our knees, facing one another. So our heads were almost, well, they might have even been touching. And there's suddenly a rifle shot, and a bullet went right through my mate's face. That was, his head was against me, and a sniper had got onto us that we thought we were in the clear, that we weren't observed. But a bullet went right, hit his face here, and it went right through, amazing. In one side and out the other, and it never touched a tooth. It didn't it didn't affect his tongue in any way. But, of course, his face was pierced on both sides, so he was an awfully fortunate man to survive, I tell you what. Yeah.
So after the man right next to you gets shot through one cheek, through the other, what do you do?
Well, of course, then you've got to get some medical help for the guy that's wounded. So we had the great medical man that we had was a conscientious objector. Which means that he wouldn't touch a firearm. I don't know whether it was on religious grounds or what it was, but he was there with us all the way, and I never heard one bad word said against him. He could, when someone was wounded, I tell you what, he was a great guy. he'd pick a man up and see to him and get him bandaged up and so on. But, all that he could carry was bandages and morphine. So...
do you need some water? Should we get him some?
Yeah. All this was during the attack on Cassino, on the township. And we'd fought our way along Route 6. And got into the township, and there's 2 hotels there, and we went past the front of a big building, and we were getting mortar fire was just streaming down on us. And so this building had a doorway in the street side of it. And it didn't have a door or anything, it just an opening there. So I said to the boys, hop in there. And I thought, well, we'll wait a while while the fire drops away. So we got in there, and someone hung a ground sheet over the entrance, this hole on the bottom of the wall, and someone else lit a match, and they're going to have a smoke. And when they lit the match, they found that this crypt or whatever it was they were in was just chock-a-block full of bones. And there was an alleyway up through the middle that was clear, but they were piled up. Oh, goodness knows how many. And there wasn't any smell or anything. They were all clean. I remember one of the guys, we had a chap in a platoon, who's quite a humorous guy, and he was almost reached middle age, and he was having a lot of trouble with sciatica or whatever in one of his hips. So the next thing old George had he said, I got a new hip. And it was just the bone of someone long dead. And so it wasn't any good to George, but however, it just lay on top of these bones. I think it was the basement of a nunnery.
What's a nunnery?
Yeah.
What is a nunnery?
Well, it's a Catholic. Where the nuns, the Italian or Catholic nuns, where they live and die too. And, they're very strict religious. But we didn't stay there very long. Of course, we had to keep moving. But, George grabbed this big thigh bone.
Could you please tell me about some of your experiences attacking German machine gun nests, or times that you guys were pinned down by German machine gun nests? How would you guys go about knocking them out?
Well, you got a radio for a start, your platoon radio, which gives you contact with the rest of your platoon or with the rest of the company. So look, every situation is different. If possible, you can take the machine gunner out yourself with a grenade. And it's surprising how close you can get if you know a bit about creeping up on positions and so on. But it's a very, very tricky situation, I tell you.
Were there specific times that your platoon was able to get that close?
Yes. We did nearly all our attacks at night. They were in the semi-darkness. And then later on, they started using searchlights. The Allies, we did. And they aimed the searchlights at the moon or up at the sky, and the reflection comes back and you get a sort of a moonlight effect, where before that it was pitch black and you could stumble into drains or whatever. But if you just got that little bit of light, yeah, that's what they did. Searchlights fired, would aim them up at the sky, and so that reflects down and gives us nothing like daylight, but it gives them much better view of the situation around you and so on. So, yeah, that was good.
Mr. Murray, when you were doing all these attacks at night, how do you know when you all are firing at the enemy, the Germans, how do you know you've been able to hit the target if you can't even see the target?
Yeah. Well, most of the attacks we did, they're just before daylight. So, by the time daylight comes, you're then aware of whatever. Or, it's surprising you get a period of semi-light before it gets daylight. But it's a difficult situation here. Just, whether you keep advancing or you stop or whatever. Just, you can't really say. It's just, at the moment, what it looks like.
Could you please describe to me the difference of being under a German mortar attack versus being under a German artillery bombardment?
Well, neither of them are good. The mortar, you don't hear a mortar fired. You hear it fired, all right, but you don't know where it's going to go. With artillery, you can hear the shell coming, and you get ready for it going to explode. But with mortars, it might only be fired from out of the shed. A mortar shell goes like that, whereas an artillery shell comes like this and then down. Different trajectory altogether. But, yeah, they, none of them are any good.
What's the best way to protect yourself from incoming German mortars or incoming German artillery?
You got to hit the ground, and even just a bit of a hollow, and keep your tin hat on. That's important, very important.
Were there people who didn't wear their helmet?
No, everyone wore a tin hat. Most important. You feel it's amazing how much safer you feel with that tin hat on.
You feel naked without it?
Well, not exactly naked, but, you know, a 303 bullet will just go in one side and out the other. They're a bit of a help against shrapnel and so on. But a bullet, if it's a direct hit, it'll just go straight through it.
Did you have any personal experiences against airbursts? The shells that
Airbursts?
When shells would explode in the air? And
Yes, often. Yeah.
Can you talk to me about your experience under an airburst?
Well, it just depends on cover. You got to find a hollow in the ground or whatever. Anyway, just get over the edge of a bank. It's quite amazing. You sort of instinctively, when that sort of thing happens, just instinctively you look for somewhere to hit the ground. You've got to get down on ground level, and if possible, in a sheltered spot, you know, in the gutter, if you're on a road, or in a hollow, or just, you know, it doesn't take much to you flatten your body out. And for the shrapnel, if it's a grenade or whatever, and it's going to explode, for it to go over the top of you, and you'll survive.
You were talking about the story of knocking out the sniper with the 75 millimeter. You don't need to repeat the story about him getting the man across from you, but it's the same sniper. Is that right?
Yeah. We thought we were in the clear, that we didn't realise we were being observed when he put the bullet through this guy's face. And so he was carted off, and that's the last I saw of him. And then later in the day, just before darkness, I suppose about this time of the day, up behind us, we didn't know it was there, a 25 millimetre anti-tank gun opened up, and it was firing directly over our heads. And when a gun fires, you get a huge muzzle blast from it, and the shell coming out and so on. So the first shot or two, we didn't know what the devil was happening. And then where we saw you could see the trajectory of these shells. And we realised then that they were firing on this sniper that had been worrying us. And so we were very happy about that. And, I suppose they fired about 8 or 9 shells, anti-tank shells, just one behind the other, bang, bang. And it's a high velocity thing, and they go off with a heck of a crack. And I didn't find out until, years and years later back home, a good friend of mine, Bob O'Brien, was talking to someone, and he talked about firing his anti-tank gun at a German sniper. And so I asked him where that took place and so on, and suddenly realised he was the one that had been in charge of the gun and doing the firing. So, I knew Bob very well, went to school with him.
Did you ever have any other close calls with German snipers when you were overseas?
No, I don't think so. We usually, you attack, or the Germans quite often just retreated.
And
So you're left holding the best position. They're at a disadvantage then.
I know earlier when we were talking about, when you were talking about patrols, you mentioned that, there are reconnaissance patrols and patrols that, you take prisoners. Do you remember going on any patrols to capture German prisoners?
Yes.
Can you tell me about that?
Well, across the river. And on one occasion, we couldn't find them anywhere. And in the finish, you just got to give up.
But
it's extremely dangerous. On some occasions we'd capture one and take him back with us. It's extremely dangerous. You're attacking a prepared position and you're going to get one man and take him back.
But how do you actually capture the German soldier?
Oh, well, we don't, although it was surprising how many of them could speak English. I think they were better educated than many people realised. But anyhow, they recognise a firearm, so you've only got to do a few movements with your rifle or whatever, and you got your bayonet fixed, and if you prod him in the backside once or twice, he's going to start moving.
How are you able to get a German all by himself? Are you just going for a German outpost, or?
Well, it's difficult to know very often. But sometimes, yes, they might have a listening post out there, and if you can get up onto it, we did the same. We had listening patrols just to go out and listen.
Would that be the same as a reconnaissance patrol?
Yeah, up to a point, yeah. When everything's quiet, surprising the sounds there are as you get out there and you just listen. And I thought my hearing came very, very acute.
Do you remember some of the things that you were able to see on some of the reconnaissance patrols that you were on? What were you looking for, and what would you report back?
Well, you're looking for any sign of enemy occupation. If there's any armaments left there. Quite often we found if the position had been occupied by Americans, and then we'd taken over from them, the Americans would leave their position and they'd leave lots of stuff behind, even firearms. So, just any evidence you could find of occupation, just haversack perhaps or whatever.
Would you guys ever go on fighting patrols with the purpose of getting into a firefight?
Yeah, just to find out where their positions are. If you're going to attack a place and it's occupied, and you do a sort of a patrol and they open up and so on, you can pinpoint where they've got their machine gun positions and so on.
Mr. Murray, I understand that all firefights are different and unique, based on who's firing and where you are and what the objective is. But could you tell me in a general sense what goes on in a firefight?
Yeah. Well, you just try and fire back from where you think the ammunition, where they're fighting from, where at night time you can see the flashes of a machine gun being fired. So you fire back at that.
What's it like not knowing if there's a bead on your head?
Well, it doesn't enter your head. You just got to keep going,
I mean, did you think about the fact that you could get killed when you were overseas, or did you try not to think about that?
Oh, you think about the good guys you've lost, and yeah.
You mentioned that you prayed before you would go into battle.
Yeah.
Was that common for the men?
I don't know. I doubtful. I couldn't tell you, but I doubt it. I only said a brief prayer too, but it whether it helps or not, you don't know. But once you do something like that.
When you came back to New Zealand, did you have any difficulties readjusting to civilian life?
Oh, yeah. Because I'd been mixing with men for, 6 years or more? And most of that time, hardly had any contact with women at all. So I found it quite difficult to sort of settle into. So when I got home, I shut the front gate and I don't think I went out for 3 months or more.
What was that like seeing your family? Tell me about the reunion with your family after the war.
Well, we got on the train off the boat and onto the train at Wellington. And the train came up and at all the stations, some men would drop off and their families be there to meet them. So we got to the Frankton railway station, I don't know, 2 o'clock in the morning or something. And the family had started milking, that night milking, which should normally be afternoon milking. I don't know, 11 o'clock or something at night, so that they could all be there to meet me at the railway station in Frankton. So there was, all the family was there, and my brothers and sister and my parents and so on, and it was great. But I was so tired when we got home. I had a cup of tea and I lay on my bed and I just went to sleep. And I slept all day, I think, and half an hour the next night.
Did you have any nightmares when you came home?
Any what?
Did you have any nightmares when you came home?
No, I don't think so that I can remember. But no, I can't really remember. But I go to sleep very easily, still do. And that's been great.
Did loud noises bother you when you came back home?
Not exceptionally, I don't think. You got so used to loud noises, I tell you. You get shells going off and mortars landing near you. And
that's what I'm saying. When you came home and you would hear a noise, a loud noise, did it remind you of the war?
Oh, yeah. But, just totally different, you know. It's a total new adjustment. Forget about all that. I was, and I'm still a bit the same, as I think that no one could walk into the bedroom. No one could. Any time of the night you like, and I'd be instantly awake. I think your body gets tuned when your life depends on it, and your whole conscious is concentrated on listening at night time for anyone advancing on you or enemy advancing. And so it stays with you, I think, for a certain, perhaps for all time, but yeah, that's how I was at any rate.
When you came home, were you all encouraged to... Did you talk about your experiences in combat with anyone when you came home?
No, I don't think so.
When did you first start to talk about it?
Not until you guys got on the job.
About 20 years ago.
When you went back to Italy?
Yeah, I did.
Before that, but when they first came back, they never...
I made a
none of them
tape.
talked about it.
Yeah, I'd made a tape, didn't I, years ago. Yeah.
What life advice do you want to give? What life advice do you want to give to future generations?
Well, no more war. And it'd be wonderful if everyone could find a job. And for everyone to get a decent education. Yeah.
What would you want to say to the men who were killed in the war? If you could talk to them, what would you want them to know?
Well, they need to know that I still remember them. But, if a man is killed, then there's a woman back here that's not going to find a husband. And that means that there's a number of children are not going to be born. So, I think we lost, 16,000 men in the war? Killed, so that's 16,000 women who are not going to find a husband because there's no one there. And when you've got a country of such as we were at that stage, it's only, I don't know, not all that much over 1 million population. And you take 16,000 out of it, plus a lot of those, you see, those women, they're going to sort of hibernate with no men about. And, it does a huge amount of damage to a country. Just losing someone like that, Those men, just they could have been, partway through education or whatever, or, members of parliament, or you don't know, or just ordinary citizens. And, yeah.
It's a whole generation.
Yeah, it's gone.
It's like how you have all the photos of all your family.
Yep.
One person gets killed in the war, none of that exists.
No, that's right. Yeah.
What kind of person do you want people to remember you as, Mr. Murray?
Well, I'd like to be thought of as I was a good husband, and a good family man. I can honestly say I never belted any of my children. I got annoyed at times, but I didn't lay my hands on them, even though perhaps I might have wanted to, but, it's something I never did. My father never hit me. I saw him hit my elder brother, but that was enough for me. I'd like to think that I've pulled my weight, I think, in the district with things that were going on and needed help, and I think I'm still doing a bit of that. And made some good friends and still hope to keep on doing that for a while yet.
Do you want to be remembered as a World War II veteran?
Yes, I think I do. And I'm sure I will be, because we've had a good organisation here in town, in Tiametu. We looked after one another, and I was chairman of it for a number of years, and we still have regular meetings and keep in touch. Well, we had attacked the position and captured it, and in the meantime we captured about 20. I couldn't say the exact number, but it would have been close to 20 Germans. And they were all quite happy, I think, to be captured. They didn't appear to be in any great hurry to break loose or anything. So we sent them off back to our back reserve with a couple of guards. And they were all totally disarmed. So they started off down the hill, and whether there was other Germans observing it or not, I'm not sure, but someone opened up on the convoy with them and our two guards with mortar fire. And so everyone has to hit the ground pretty smart when the mortar shells keep falling closer and closer. And so the Germans kept skipping away, and there was a sunken road just down below this position where they could get down over a bank and start running back to their own positions. So this is what happened, and virtually the whole lot, we lost them all again because of this mortar fire and the fact that they could get away and get down over the edge of the bank and out of sight of us. And once or twice I just saw their heads bobbing as they're running along on the roadside. So I opened up on them with a Bren gun, but I doubt whether I hit anyone. But these sort of things can happen any time you capture people and then you lose them again and so on. But they seemed quite happy to be captured, and I thought, well, what a pity they were out of the war, but now they're back into it again.
Do you remember providing first aid to any of the wounded men around you?
Yeah. Well, we each carried a bandage, one bandage each, and it's on your knee, on your battle dress. So This depends what the wound is like. Our first aid man was a conscientious objector, and he wouldn't touch a firearm of any sort. But by gee, he was excellent. When it came that someone got wounded, he was the man to have around, and he was a great man in the platoon. And he was so careless of his own safety that eventually the Germans captured him. So whether he got home or not, I don't know. But he was. He'd go out and help anyone that was wounded. It didn't matter how much fire was going on.
Could you please tell me, do you remember any of the types of wounds that you helped patch up?
Well, a bullet wound is one of the worst because it's just a little blemish. The ones I saw, some of them could be dreadful, no doubt, but the ones I saw were just a little hole in a man's body and a little bit of blood seeping out. And he could still talk and so on, but obviously in quite a lot of pain and, in a bad part of his body through his chest and so on, and not a possible chance of getting, expert help to him. So you do what you can do, and just keep giving him a sip of water or something to help. But you've got to wait until you get enough people there to carry him out on a stretcher. So, it's not easy.
Do you remember? Can you talk about the differences between being hit by small arms fire versus being hit by shrapnel? What is shrapnel?
Shrapnel is dreadful. It's that it'll tear the skin, tear great chunks off your legs or whatever. Whereas a bullet, if it doesn't kill you, it'll go straight through. Well, if it hits a bone, of course, it'll break it. But, shrapnel can cause shocking wounds.
Like what?
Well, open a man's belly up, for instance, or take his one arm off or whatever, whereas a bullet would go straight through. A good friend of mine who died just last year, a bullet hit him on the arm here, and it glanced off the bone and into his chest. And it went through his chest and it glanced downwards, and they took it out down by his opposite hip. But he was a mass of scars for the rest of his life. But he finished up having a reasonable life, and not long ago he passed on.
You had mentioned there was a belly wound from shrapnel.
Yeah.
Is that something that you treated yourself?
Well, you do all you can do. Look, you've only got first aid bandages, which are quite big. And that's all you can do is put a bandage over it and hope that the bleeding stops. But what's happening inside your body, you've got no control over that. And the sooner you can get someone like that back to the battalion doctor, the better chance they've got of surviving. Yeah, I was taking this wounded man to the doctor. It was just light enough for me to be able to do that. He'd been hit through the body with rifle fire, but he could still walk. And we had to walk, I suppose, or over a quarter of a mile back. And the doctor was in a building, and it wasn't any use the doctor setting up his headquarters out in the open if there was some sort of building available. So all I could do was leave him there with the doctor and several, I suppose, nurses or whatever. But outside, on the way, there was a Sherman tank, and just while we were there, a German 88mm anti-tank gun, and they were a fantastic gun, and it put a shell right into that tank, and I think most of the people inside, I think there were about 5 of a crew, and I think most of them would have been killed. I remember on one occasion we'd occupied a position, and a group of our tanks came over the hill behind us, 5 of them, and they made their way slowly down the hill towards behind us and towards a group of trees. And this anti-tank gun got range onto them, and as long as it took no time at all, and he killed the whole 5 tanks just with 1 shot each. It was open slather, really. And I guess all the crew would have been killed as well. I saw the tank, yeah, there's about 5 tanks, and they make quite a screaming noise, a tank, when they're moving with the tracks and so on. We hated the things in the infantry because they draw so much attention and they attract so much enemy fire, and of course we're in the middle of it. So, but yeah, they're vulnerable. Yeah, tell you what, that depending on what ammunition and so on is used against them, but the 88mm German anti-tank gun was a deadly weapon.
What did it look like when those tanks were actually hit?
Well, it just looked like the same tank with a hole in them. And probably all the crew, they're just quiet, no motors not running or whatever. I don't know whether the crew had been got out of these tanks, or I'm sure some of them weren't, at any rate. But, yeah.
I mean, was there an explosion or...
No.
So it's not like the movies?
Not a bit like the movie. No. Not a bit. No. No, not a bit like the movies. They... you see these on the movies, you know, someone attacking a place, and he's got his Tommy gun and he's spraying bullets everywhere. You know, in reality, you can fire off a clip of ammunition almost in seconds. And even though he might carry 2 more clips, you can stick them on your gun and they won't last any time either. I learned to fire my Tommy gun on single shot. But if you leave it on automatic, boy, you can empty the magazine in just no time. And then you're left in trouble. If you got a nervous person in there, at one stage we were going to have to stand underneath concentrated bombing. So we were just out on the side of this rocky hill, and the bombers came over and started dropping bombs, and they were landing on this rock, and of course going off with incredible amount of noise and so on. And one young guy took to his heels and took off. And I shouted out, "Stop!" And he stopped. And I said, "Get back here." And so he came back to the rest of us, and he was crying, which is quite normal. In fact, several other quite older men were crying as well, because I think it's a natural action that you get in that extreme danger of, and especially when you can't do anything in the way of reacting to help yourself. So you just got to stand there and take it. So it's not pleasant, but it does help if you've got a little bit of authority, because you've not only got to think about yourself, you've got the rest of the unit that you're in charge of. And so you have to bear that in mind too.